In space, no one can hear you scream. When I was a kid, I had no exposure to survival horror games whatsoever. I was the eldest sibling in my family. I had no older cousins to play them for me. And on top of that, I was a pussy-ass bitch. So when I bought my first gaming console, Grandma's stuffing from the kids next door was scary. The crocodile enemies from the Ed and Eddie video game were terrifying. Everything was a survival horror game to me because I didn't know what the consequences of dying were. So can you imagine what I went through buying Resident Evil 4 on my 7th birthday? The essence of a good survival horror game isn't just having spooky zombies and jump scares, but to create tension, an atmosphere that is eerily silent, sound design that plays tricks on the mind, and a power imbalance that causes panic. What do I mean by that? In super simple terms, you know how you feel helpless when you're playing Amnesia or Outlast because you don't have a weapon in hand? And then, when you're playing Resident Evil, you feel a bit safer because you have a weapon now, until it doesn't do shit to Mr. X or Nemesis. Or how in The Evil Within, the chainsaw guy makes me panic, and then I have a weapon and I make him panic, and then the long-legged lady scares the shit out of me, but then I kill her with fire. And then there's the guy with a box on his head, and then there's two of them. Fuck me. Fear comes from anxiety. What happens if I go down that hallway? What's around that corner? What will happen when the enemy catches up to me? Sci-fi horror is the supreme way to experience survival horror because it amplifies that anxiety to 1,000. A futuristic, post-apocalyptic world where science and tech have made advancements is the perfect setting for a horror game if the developer has a shred of creativity. Throw all of that into outer space and... oh my god. I'm scared. The Dead Space trilogy. This series was the king of the sci-fi horror throne and absolutely terrifying as a kid, especially Dead Space 2. The vast loneliness of outer space, the disturbing images of the necromorphs, the false power fantasy created by having the plasma cutter in possession, only to realize that these fucking things keep coming at you even after dismembering them. Sci-fi horror was at its peak, and then you followed that up with Alien Isolation, where the xenomorph was beyond terrifying because you couldn't predict how or where the fuck it was going. Soma, where the atmosphere would have completely stolen the show if not for how amazingly bleak and depressing the story was. Prey, where I had severe trust issues every time I entered a room because the alien wanted to play fucking prop hunt. And then, nothing. Radio silence. Survival horror almost had to start over and figure out if it wanted to be too scary or not scary enough. And while it was finding its feet, no one was taking a crack at sci-fi horror anymore. Until... Signalis went under a lot of people's radars last year, and it really shouldn't have because this game is fantastic. It's almost a tribute to the original Resident Evil and Silent Hill games, but manages to stand on its own 2 feet. It's not outright terrifying, it's just very unsettling. The kind of horror game where you feel a slow burn, the anxiety felt due to uncertainty, gaps in the protagonist's knowledge that slowly start to fill themselves as you uncover the events of the game's story. There's a lot of dead bodies that litter the corridors, a lot of blood-stained corpses, cutscene of a creature with a cleaver carving up what looks like flesh. Sometimes the game changes to a first-person view, and I don't like it because what if something pops up from the corner of my eye? Don't look in the hole! Ah, okay, there's nothing there. But then there's the puzzles. Oh, I love these. They're not so obscure that you feel completely lost, but they're not super easy either, where you're like, really? That's a puzzle. Sometimes you'll take screenshots of a keycard embedded in another object. Other times you go on a desktop computer to figure out the frequency of a radio signal. There's just so much meat packed in under 10 hours of gameplay. No fluff. Signalis moves at what feels like a slow pace, but then the surroundings change so suddenly and you're like, damn! The fuck is that? At this point I'm like, oh shit! The sci-fi horror scene is back, bitches. Glenn Schofield is whipping up the scariest game ever made on next-gen consoles, and it's going to be set within the PUBG universe. Wait, you know what's sad? It's not even a bad game. It's just not a $60 to $70 game either. The premise of being locked up in Black Iron Prison on one of the moons of Jupiter known as the Dead Moon, where the trailer shows an infected outbreak and rogue machines blasting off prisoners' heads. How the fuck does this go wrong? Well, remember when I talked about panic-inducing power imbalance? That all goes out the window in the Callisto Protocol because I'm no longer playing a survival horror game, I'm playing Sifu. The decision to implement melee-based combat on top of gunplay, on top of the ability to dodge, and make this the core gameplay for a survival horror game gives this a bit of an identity crisis, as if it wasn't quite sure what game it wanted to be. It's definitely not the scariest game on next-gen consoles because my editor is a pussy-ass bitch who needs people in the same room with him to even play horror games. The fact that he was texting me saying, "Nah, I ain't even scared," is just sad. It's a shame because the story is actually pretty interesting. Jacob is the pilot of an aircraft who is imprisoned by this random warden who wants you alive at all costs. There's an outbreak of infected and you just want to get out of here, but there's something off about what goes on in Black Iron Prison, and you have to go deeper underground to find out what it is. The voice acting is pretty damn good, and the characters are interesting enough to be invested in their stories. And it's not like there wasn't passion that went into making this game. In fact, it reminds me a lot of what happened with The Order 1886, where it didn't end up doing well because of its price tag and the fact that it was a really short game. There's slivers of good shit in here too. The atmosphere is fantastic. There are hallways with pipes and machinery that are eerily quiet. You're caught in a blizzard with shadows moving in the background, wreckages of old factories and underground power stations with enemies that remind me of the clickers from The Last of Us. Look at this. Here's a group of Callisto clickers. Absolutely fucked on. What? To say the game is disappointing is an understatement. When you say you're making the scariest game on next-gen consoles, you have to tell us which game you're talking about, because it's the game you wanted to make a spiritual successor for that was the actual success. Just remade. Ultimately, Glenn Schofield's horror legacy is more defined by this fucking masterpiece, and the fact that EA allowed Motive to take their time with it and make a completely ground-up remake devoid of any glitches or bugs. Who the fuck are you, and what have you done to EA? If you haven't played the original games, there's no better time to start than now. The remake is faithful to the original for the most part, with some pretty neat changes like backtracking and side quests. And while there will always be a debate between classic versus remake, this is still a genuinely fantastic game, and for my money, the best way to play it. The reason Dead Space works so well is because the game has a more thrilling sense of horror. Flashes of movement across doorways, hugging corners isn't an option because the necromorphs come from the walls, from the ceiling, and they're like, "Hey, headshots don't fucking work here. You gotta dismember them." And then I'm like, oh. You can freeze a necromorph in place, take out a buzzsaw, and then that's good. You can chop off a limb, use kinesis to grab it and then impale them with it. You can set them on fire, laser beam them, pull them into a gravity well, and even use the force. Enemy variety isn't ever a problem because when you think you figured out one necromorph variant, boom, baby necromorph, stingray necromorph that makes stronger necromorphs, speed necromorphs. You're always finding new ways to deal with enemy types. It's so much fun and keeps things from feeling stagnant. Whereas in the spiritual successor, I never had to change my approach. Also, Isaac isn't a silent protagonist, and he sounds really good. His dialogue isn't corny like Leon's from Resident Evil.
Because you killed my small-time subordinate.
Sadler, you're small time.
It's a welcome addition. It's crazy that we're remaking all these old games from a time period where developers were getting really creative with the shit they did, and so much success is being owed to predecessors. Dead Space in particular is from 2008, and yet, if you erase the trilogy from existence and release this game as a brand new IP in 2023, you would still find it better than the shit most companies put out. I just hope that we get a remake for Dead Space 2, and we see more sci-fi horror games, you know, like the ones from Summer Games Fest, implement brand new ideas, because I'm fucking sick and tired of these zombie games. There's only one zombie game I'll play happily right now.
Oh yeah.
Hadouken!